Hello there, action takers. Have you ever considered how powerful communities could be in propelling your business to the next level? I'm David B., your friend and teammate in this business journey, and along with the ever insightful Teresa Merrick, we're here to help you navigate that labyrinth of doubts and uncertainties as we dive into the world of community building in today's episode of the IDKWTF I Was Doing podcast. Teresa and I have been in this game for years, honing our skills, learning the ropes, and experimenting with various strategies to bring you the best practices that work. And today, we're ecstatic to share an intriguing conversation we had with Venia Logan, a community architect and founder of SociallyConstructed.Online. It's a consultancy and digital training company that helps corporations and startups thrive by expanding the health of your business community engagement. How does she do it? By ensuring the community organizer, which is typically you, has the best possible skills to manage using proven frameworks and science-backed methods. This interview was so full of information, we actually had to break it into two parts. But right here in part one, Venia discusses the journey of her non-traditional route into becoming a professional community advisor. She then goes real deep and explains what she found to be the 6 burdens of community growth. These are the 6 things that could potentially bring a thriving community and, in extension, the entire business to its knees. And if that wasn't enough, she caps off part 1 of this episode by sharing some essential strategies for building and maintaining your successful online community. So, if you've ever struggled with fostering a sense of belonging among your customers, or if you've hit a wall trying to engage your community, this episode is for you. It's an unmissable deep dive into the do's and don'ts of community management, packed with Venia's unique insights and actionable advice. And remember, we're not just giving you some trout here, we're actually teaching you how to fish. Our goal is to empower you to take charge, to step up and create income from your interests, no matter how daunting the task might seem. And believe us when we say we've been there and we've got your back. So be sure to listen to the full episode because there's a gold mine of wisdom waiting for you. Hit that subscribe button, buckle up, and let's dive into the rich world of community building with Venia Logan. Let's go, action takers. Have you ever started something new and didn't finish it?
You were excited. You invested time and money.
You got stuck.
I'm Teresa Merrick.
And I'm David B.
And this is the podcast with 2 ADHD entrepreneurs, and we've been there.
And worked with hundreds of people in the exact same place.
The IDKWTF I Was Doing podcast will take you away from feelings of frustration and overwhelm.
And lead you to the clarity you need to take action and get shit done.
Listen today because it's important to admit that no one really knows
what the fuck they're doing.
And welcome back, action takers, to another episode of the IDK WTF I Was Doing podcast. I am David B.
And I'm Teresa Merrick. And we are here today with Venia Logan, who is an online community architect.
Hello, how's it going? Thank you so much for having me.
We're absolutely honored to have you here. And I am really excited because you have an incredible journey that you've gone through, and you make really, really high quality content that I've just been consuming lately. So I'm really happy to have you here on our show.
Absolutely. I hope it's helpful content for you.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself for our audience members who don't quite know you yet?
Yeah, so my name is Samantha Venia Logan. I do go by Venia, and I am an online community architect and the founder of a company called SociallyConstructed.Online. So what I do is I build cultural spaces for clients. I build online communities, and then I use those online communities as sites to teach the social science of online community. So while a lot of people, community facilitators, community coordinators, moderators, a lot of these terms and these roles all fall under this term of community management. And I'm very much on that technical side. I build the online space, I measure those spaces, and then I teach the key stakeholders, the business owner or the people who are running an open source project, how to sustainably grow and foster that community while measuring its online community health.
Wow. Well, how did you get interested in creating communities like this?
Yeah, I do think it's interesting because in our field, Adrian Spire, incredible person that I love, he created a book recently, highly recommend the book, called The Accidental Community Manager. And it's a manual for people who just fall into this role because it happens that frequently. Like we're
Mm.
trying to create online communities about our own passions. And we start with these friendships and these collections. And then we say, we want to make this more. And I'm no different. That's how I started. Back in 2011, I started a YouTube channel called Name is Sammy, and it led to another YouTube channel, a collaborative channel called Trans Youth Channel. It was all about trans people sharing their experiences over the course of a week. And that snowballed into a community of 4,400 self-closeted and underrepresented people who all needed access to resources but didn't want to be outed online. And this was the time when retarget marketing occurred, right? We started to see the internet build and track and optimize a large majority of those funnels in a way that made LGBTQ people a little bit queasy, right? And I built this space all about safety, security, and anonymity. So I couldn't measure them. And I had to somehow prove to grants for this nonprofit organization that this was an audience worth funding in. And that's how I started. And so truth be told, I didn't really know what I was doing. So I went to college and I'm like, hey, I need help. And college was, so we don't know. We have no communication, business, take journalism, maybe anthropology. Yeah, that'll work. And then they basically just gave me a slew of these different classes and I took them all. I trailblazed my own course. Colorado State University was incredible about doing that. And by the end of it, I came out with a degree in the anthropology of virtual worlds, at which point I'm like, yay, I know how communities work, but I don't know how the internet works. And as a result, I ended up going into full stack marketing. Worked with Ryan Dice, Justina Fenberg over at Digital Marketer, got 11 certifications at the time, including a community certification. And ever since then, I've been off to the races, building brand communities that combine marketing strategies with traditional anthropological research in order to create really vibrant, healthy online communities.
So you built up a community and then went to school to learn how to use it better or how to do it better?
Yeah, I did.
It's wild. Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting.
I think that's really interesting, and I think a lot of our listeners can relate to that because that actually happened to me as well. It was just something I had an interest in that I started collecting people around me, and then it ended
Yeah.
up becoming a community, and then eventually someone's like, "You should build a website." And I know how to build a website, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's how Colorado Mastermind, my other company, formed, was really just me looking for other people to be around with similar interests. And then it just grows and develops. And I think a lot of our listeners who are like building their own businesses or like really getting passionate into projects, it's such a great thing to have, is a place where people who are similar to you can come, feel safe, feel connected, and be open to sharing the things that they find interesting.
One of the fun things about that, and this is like my biggest advice, if you want to start a community, you don't need to know the academics. Like, obviously, I want you to hire me, right? But honestly, you don't need to. Because in order to start a community, really all you need is three people like you to share the same goals. And then three people you look up to provide you guidance, join their communities, and then find three people that you think you can help. And right there are immediately 12 people that you can build a really strong, thriving, small group, exclusive community with. The big issue now is formalizing it, structuring it, scaling it. But that's how communities are largely built. And that's also something that's almost innate to humans building online communities. We're a cultural species, you know?
Yeah, now
Absolutely.
that we're all looking at our phones all the time, because it's interesting, people will talk about it like it's a bad thing almost, but it depends. It depends if you're isolating yourself, and I think that's where it's happened a lot. Is we're on a little world, but if we have a community that we're part of, and now that's where social media and networking and Discord has blown up and all of those things. But my question for you is, so what if you have an existing community and say it's 100 people. And then, so this rule of 3, 3, and 3, I think is amazing and so clear. But so you already have this group and maybe you don't know where these people fit. What would you recommend at that point? Because obviously you don't want to like scrap it. It's already there.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. So we're gonna get into a thing. This is actually my most recent like project, and I'm so, so happy you brought this up. Over the course of 10 years, I've been building community for 10 years, right? I've come across something called a cultural universal, which is across a variety of different cultures. And that's what communities are. They are a well defined unit of culture. There are specific similarities, and they don't always shake out the same. The way that these similarities occur might have differences, but virtually all communities will go through them. And what I'm calling them recently is called the 6 burdens of community growth. And what this is a dialectical tension between the people who are in a small community. You have a high touch situation with them. You're talking with them all the time. You know them. You know their cat's name. You know their children. Like
Mhm.
they talk to you all the time. And it's this high sense of belonging that people really find powerful in an online community. And for brand businesses, especially, but for most communities, you want to grow fast, right? But you don't want to ruin that vibe. So there's these dialectical tensions, 2 tensions that are not necessarily bad in and of themselves, but they tend to clash.
Mhm.
And the first tension is tradition. This is the way it's been. This is the way we've been building. We use these traditions as a social glue. And then the second tension is innovation. Everyone loves innovation and they want to grow, they want to prosper. For brand communities, especially, there's that ROI factor, return on investment factor. And what happens is, as you start to grow, like you were saying, from that 100 people, you know, like, and trust everyone, it's super, super easy, into a larger group. There are these 6 primary burdens that tend to come up. So the burden of allocation is this notion that as you grow, people start to go from responsibilities, long-term trust, and I'm willing to build a website and it'll take 2 months. Sure, why not? Because there's no one else to do it, into allocation. There's 3,000 people here and I don't really want to take up a website, but I can do something small. Can you just piecemeal a project for me? So that burden of allocation is, as you scale, people move from responsibility to allocation.
Mhm.
There's a few others as well, including the burden of attribution, whereas independent one on one meetings and generation of content becomes vague as you scale. So you start to need more structured communication. So one on one meetings don't work enough. So you start to build support groups, and then those get too big. So you create a newsletter. And then that newsletter becomes too cumbersome. So you create a blog and a forum, that kind of thing. So your media starts to get more and more vague as you grow. The third one is contribution. So contribution is the notion that as people come into your space, they have a finite amount of work that they can perform for the community. It's logarithmic. So it'll start pretty fast, but eventually people start to get overwhelmed and you start to burn out your primary contributors. Meanwhile, the reward that comes out of doing that work is exponential. A small number of people are doing the work, but the entire community starts to grow beyond its britches. And it's a community manager's job to make sure that the reward and the work kind of stay close. If you're interested, I have an entire video on my YouTube channel. But the other one is distribution, which is, as your community grows, it starts to grow onto different platforms. And there's no way that you can really stop that. Your community is going to meander into places that you don't want them to. And you just have to be okay with it. And then remuneration. As your community grows, the people paying for the communities cost money, right? There's that ROI factor. As your community grows, the role of those stakeholders moves away from the community, so they view less value in the community because they're not in it as often. They have all of the upkeep and overhead to deal with. So you have to build systems to solve that problem. And then the last one is the one that we are all familiar with. This is where diversity, equity, and inclusion occurs. This is where community managers spend a lot of time. And that's in stratification. The notion that as groups grow, processes and structures to sustain those groups become more difficult to maintain over time. especially where equality and equity are concerned. So 6 burdens: allocation, attribution, contribution, distribution, remuneration, and stratification.
Yeah, those are all really, really hitting the nail on the head because that's something that I've never heard articulated before. Yeah, that's really interesting. I really like that.
It's super interesting, and we'll definitely put a link to that YouTube video in the show notes. So for anybody who wants to go hear a more deep dive, we will definitely do that because I'm going to go watch it too. Thank you for answering that question and giving me all those details.
Do you feel there's a perfect size of a group that avoids kind of those issues and maintains?
Oh, I am so glad you said that. One of the number one mistakes I see in community building is the exact same mistake that we had in email marketing several years ago. Honestly, it still happens. You need to garden your community. A bigger number is not always there. And the reason for that is because your community should be providing more than value. Everyone says provide value in marketing. It's the biggest thing. Always be upfront about value. But value isn't just assets. It's not just content. It's not growing your community for the sake of growing your community so that you can say, hey, our community did this thing. And one of the things that people tend to notice is the activity and engagement rate in communities tends to be like a 2% avid user base. We tend to call those super users. And then it's about 7 to 8% of people will engage regularly enough to count as daily contributors. And then in addition to that, you have maybe 70% who are just casual. And then the rest are lurkers. We're struggling with the lurkers term in the industry, really. They're basically observers. And there's a difference between people who are observing your community and receiving your impact and your inactive community, which you can consider your audience, people that you haven't brought in yet. And when people go from being observers to being truly inactive, you need to have a way of understanding the difference between the two. Because it's not just engaging in your community. They might be engaging in blogs and content and stuff like that. But if they're not engaging in the community, then you need to say, hey, is this right for you? Would you prefer just to subscribe to the YouTube channel or to be on the newsletter rather than being in this space?
I'm often an observer. I'll just go through and I'll read everything and I'm really excited for it to be there, but I'm not necessarily posting or contributing. And so that's an interesting distinction because there are other groups where I'm a part of, but I just don't even look at it.
So I guess to answer your question on an easy path, there's no Goldilocks zone of perfect contributors or members, but you should keep in mind the burden of contribution where your active members are taking on the burden of the vast majority of the reward you provide to your community. And if that's getting a little bit ridiculous, then perhaps it's time for you to create a more exclusive group in order to help perform that work more stably.
Yeah, that makes total sense. My understanding, I'm not an algorithm expert at all, but that's also like a very important thing to do, especially on social media, is to get rid of the inactive users because it shows the algorithms that your group isn't important and people don't care about it.
Mhm.
So it keeps it away from finding the people that might be more engaged as well. So
Yeah.
it hurts even more.
I agree.
And I really love the term garden your community. It's so much nicer than so many other terms I've heard, but it's no really you have to pull anything that's taken all the soil nutrients or taken up the sunshine, but not making it a better space to be in.
I agree. Absolutely. I love that.
All right. Well, it's time to take just a quick break. Oh my gosh, my brain is exploding. So much good information. So we're going to take a really quick break, hear from our sponsors, and we will be right back. Have you ever started something new that you were really excited about and invested time or money into, but after doing it for a while, you reach a point and you just feel like, I have no idea what the F I'm doing?
There's that bubbling up of frustration because you're not quite as good as you thought you'd be, or it's nowhere near as easy as you expected. Then suddenly, a wave of guilt comes at the same time, and you don't really want to or feel like you can express this to anyone.
Having a dream you want to accomplish can be very sad and isolating. It's lonely because visionaries tend to see the world the way that it could be, instead of settling for the way the world currently is, like most people do.
We believe this so deeply that we wrote a book with the exact 4 steps to help.
This guide is designed to take you out of that feeling of frustration and overwhelm and lead you into the calmness and clarity that you need to reach the life that you know in your heart you're destined to have.
If you've started a project or a goal but have stopped, gotten stuck, or are starting to feel burned out, this is 100% the book for you.
Go to IDKWTF podcast.com today and download your digital copy with the coupon code ACTION to get it on us, because we want to join you and be your supportive friends and partners throughout your journey.
It's only free for a limited time if you use the code ACTION by going to our website, IDKWTFpodcast.com.
Check it out today and let's get unstuck together.
And welcome back, everybody. Yeah, we have those 6 burdens of growth. So when communities are getting bigger, there's a lot of struggle. But what about for those of our listeners who might be starting something new, and they might be, like we talked about, they might have this passion, this interest in things they want, and they know there's other people out there that share those interests. What are some tips you might have for them to start a community in 2023?
Absolutely. First off, have fun. Good luck. Make mistakes. First get good and then get better, right? Mistakes make better plans. So don't feel too worried about making mistakes early on. The community is going to be very lenient with you. And honestly, their quips and their problems with the community are there because they're passionate and they're excited to get started. So don't feel too worried about that. First get good, then get better, right? That having been said, some advice. I don't care what role you take in building your online community. You could be the best of the best community manager or community architect. You can know everything you're doing. You could be in for a decade. Or you could be bumbling through the dark trying to figure out how to build this community space. Your goals are exactly the same, right? So all community boils down to 2 things: setting precedent. I think that this would be best for this space, and then building momentum. I would like to move forward with this until your community is doing that thing on their own. So figure out what your precedent is. Go to your community and ask what would make things better. And once you find those precedents, find the one that is going to make the biggest impact. That impact could be on your own ROI. After all, you have to make that money to sustain the community. Find that precedent, focus on that precedent, put together your key performance indicators, and then once you have an understanding of that precedent, build momentum. Start with your super users and the people who are really, really passionate, get them on board, and then go to the next, what we call scope of your online community. So your community is going to be composed of what are effectively concentric circles. So you have your most active users, and then you have your semi-active users, and then everyone else. What you need to do is take that precedent, get your active users on board, and then build momentum until all of your scope is involved and the community is doing that thing on its own, and then go to your next precedent. So if you want to build and start with community, this is the core of action and implementation on your community. Set precedent, build momentum. That's probably tip number 1, I would say.
Great. So we're going to set our precedent. Then what are we going to do?
Yeah. So once you've set precedent and build momentum, remember those concentric circles that are a part of your community. The way that your community is growing and building is from the outside in, but you're building it from the inside out. So understanding, mapping out your scopes is paramount. And the way that I recommend doing this is a sociological concept that has existed since 1980. There was this absolutely brilliant sociologist who basically defined something we all know. And that is that society is stratified into a series of concentric circles. So Yuri Bronfenbrenner created this idea of infrapersonal communication. You talk to yourself. And then interpersonal communication. How do you express yourself to your friends, your family members, et cetera, your close friends? And then beyond that is your inner community, the people that you connect with and rely on and build. Sometimes it's your coworkers, which leads us to our next concentric sphere, which is the organization. And that's where you start to build this sense of shared identity, shared goals, shared values, a mission statement. Once your organization has been built, you have a wider community. And these are all of your competitors and your like collaboration opportunities, your other brands. And then you get into the macro parts of society, the public space, building law and policy. What I want you to do, and this is number 2 for starting your community, is start to build this way, focus on the socio-ecological model, because if it works for governance, it probably works for your smaller community. What this means is to define your scopes and figure out what the boundaries between those scopes are. What
Can you
convinces a person to go from the general community into the deeper community?
can you
And what is
define
that
the
onboarding
words?
funnel?
Can you define the word scope real quick?
Sure. So in sociology, a scope is basically a research site. So are you on an interpersonal scope? Are you on a small group scope? Are you studying city or are you studying a smaller culture in Papua New Guinea? So a scope is effectively defining the boundaries of a specific space that your community resides in.
Okay, perfect.
So define your scope. And this leads us nicely into the third tip for you, which is keep in mind, I've said the word boundary quite often. There's a membrane for your community, and the marketers who are listening are going to be so stoked to hear this. This is where funnels exist. So what happens is at your membrane, you need 2 things. The first thing is transparency, seeing past that membrane into a community, seeing the value and making them want to cross that membrane is incredibly important. But then there's a second step, porosity. And this is incredibly important for community managers and marketers alike. How easy is it for them to transgress the boundary from wider scope A to more specific scope B? What is that onboarding pathway? And what a lot of people do is they say, well, of course I want them closer to my brand. Why wouldn't I want them closer to my brand? And people start to join the community and things get haywire. And you're like, we're growing. Great. But does it mean anything? Well, did you qualify your leads going from community A into community B? Because if you didn't qualify them, what's the actual inherent value of those people coming in? Are they coming in too early and therefore not getting the value they thought they saw? Or are they coming in, or is it too difficult for them to transgress that boundary and you're actually making it more difficult on them? And that's where the concept of friction in a funnel becomes your best tool for creating online community.
Perfect. Okay. So we're going to set a precedent. We are going to define our scope, or like what our community actually like, the size, what it looks like, all of that. And then we're going to set a boundary so that we're actually getting the right people into the right parts of our community so that we're providing the most value for them. Is that
Exactly.
accurate? Okay.
Yep.
Great.
1, 2, 3. One of the important things that I want to consider is, especially in like social justice and open source spaces, there's this notion of we have to be inclusive. And one of the things I've learned in my career is that exclusivity breeds inclusivity. If you make a membrane that is too weak, if the onboarding path is too easy for what you're trying to accomplish, you are diluting the value of that space and you are making it less useful for the people who need it.
That makes complete sense. And I think that's something David and I have talked a lot about. Just and even it's when you're creating anything at all, when you're creating a business, when you're creating a podcast, when you're doing something for people, if the scope is too wide, then yeah, you're not really talking to anybody. You're like talking out into the world and there's no reason for anybody to focus in on you. So that
Exactly.
makes complete sense. And there's a difference between saying everybody here is welcome and you're welcome if this is the parameters that you fit in as far as what you're interested in, what your needs are, where at in your project or whatever it is you're looking for. So
Yeah. Yeah. So just to summarize, I guess, there's the notion of setting precedent and building momentum, and that's going to allow you to build your scopes from the inside out. The socio-ecological model is a really, really great way for you to look at how you want to build your community, and that'll also help you as you grow, right? That's a model that grows with you. And the only thing that you need to worry about in that area is making sure that your membranes encapsulate your value perfectly and that people coming into that space are transgressing that membrane when they're ready.
And I imagine this is something you help people with.
I do. Yes. Yes, I do. So like I said before, I have a consultant arm to my business, which is very much, I'll build this for you. I'll design this if you like. I'll actually help you implement it. And then what we do is we use that accomplishment, that success in your own site as a way to teach other community managers how to do the same. And the idea is a co-iterative, co-created learning experience that is my hope. We're going to create a better, more healthy virtual world.
Thank you for listening. This has been part 1 of our 2-part series on this topic.
The second episode will be out next week, if it's not out already.
If you enjoyed today's conversation, please consider liking, subscribing, and/or reviewing us on wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Also, if there's someone you know who clearly doesn't know what the fuck they're doing and would benefit from this topic, please hit that share button and send them this episode.
Let's normalize the feeling of uncertainty.
Asking for help and admitting that we don't know
What the fuck we're doing either.